republic one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Dunn, would you say the prayer?
Yes. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we are here today to conduct matter of business. Guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom unto our decisions to be successful for the future of our children. Continue to bless all that are gathered here today. We love you, dear Lord, and say thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, I'm going to call roll. Mr. Bass?
Present.
Mr. Bilson?
Present.
Mrs. Dunn? Mr. Cadella?
Here.
Mr. Pareto? Here. Mr. Petrosi? Here. Mr. Velardo?
Here.
He told me not to do consent.
I think we should call for the clerk pro tem first. Yeah.
Motion by Mr. Velardo, second by Mr. Wilson. The motion was for Nick Wendy, clerk pro temp for the 2 meetings.
I'll take the roll on that.
Mr. Bass?
Earl? I'm here. I'm sorry. Yes.
Mr. Bilson?
Yes.
Mr. Consemi? Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Congratulations.
How many yeas was that?
Me and Mr. Capizzi were not called because they are not entitled to vote until after they're swearing in. So there was just a roll call on the 7 members. If it please you, Mr. Superintendent, should we move forward with the swearing in?
Please do, sir.
Mr. Kansemi, would you please attend the podium?
Well, you know I love to do this. Mike could vote. He's already a board member.
No, Mike will be sworn in again.
Oh, again he gets sworn
Again,
in?
yes.
Oh, then I'm wrong.
But we go in the order, Mr. Kansemi.
I should know better than challenge Mr. Massaro.
Mr. Kansemi has the full term, so he's sworn in first. Mr. Kansemi, would you raise your right hand, please? And would you repeat after me? I, Vincent J. Kansemi,
I, Vincent J. Consemi,
will support the Constitution of the United States
will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and to further solemnly swear
and to firmly solemnly swear
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of board member of the Board of Education
I will faithfully discharge the duties of the Niagara Falls Board of Education,
board member of, according to the best of my ability.
according to my best of my ability.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kansemi. If you sign here. Right there, Jim.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Capizzi. Although Mr. Capizzi was sworn in after the election at the special meeting, we've had the tradition of swearing in that candidate to fill the term also at the organizational meeting. Mr. Capizzi, will you raise your right hand and repeat after me? I, Michael Capizzi Jr.,
I, Michael Capizzi Jr.,
do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of board member of the Board of Education
of board member of Board of Education
according to my best ability.
according to my best ability.
Congratulations again, Mr. Capizzi.
Thank you.
Here's Michael, you have to just sign here.
I keep signing this book. It's like a setup. Jesus.
Next, we're going to give you a check to sign at Michael's.
Hopefully somebody gives me a check to endorse. Right here.
No, that's it. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to entertain a motion to select a temporary chairman to commence the voting of the officers. And I thought I heard Mr. Velardo make a motion nominating me to be temporary chairman.
Well, I don't think you heard that, but I will make a motion to make
Yeah, maybe he changed his mind. I'll second that motion, Mr.
It's seconded by Mr.
The only reason why
Petrosi.
I've made this motion is I can vote against it if I have to.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, I will act as temporary chairman. And as temporary chairman, I would like to now open up the election for president of the Board of Education. We will have a roll call vote unless there is any objection from members of the board, which is our usual tradition. So the election for the office of president of the board is open. Do I hear any nominations from the board members? Mr. Bilson, who did you nominate? Mr. Petrosi? Do I have any further nominations for office of president of the Board of Education? Any further nominations? If not, will someone make a motion to cast one vote electing Mr. Petrosi president of the Board of Education for the coming year? Mr.
Move
Bilson? Second? Mr. Velardo? Take a roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto? Yes. Mr. Petrosi? Yes. And Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi, would you attend the podium, please? Russell, raise your right hand, please. And repeat after me. I, Russell Petrosi,
I, Russell Petrosi,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of Board President
the duties of Board President
of the Board of Education
the Board of Education
of the City School District of the City of Niagara
of
Falls,
the City School District of the City of Niagara Falls,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Angela.
You have to sign, Russell. Now, Russell, I'm figuratively giving you the gavel.
Okay.
And you conduct the election of the vice president.
Okay, I shall do that. Thank you.
And then we'll swear whoever the vice president is and commence the business.
righty, thank you, and thank you, colleagues. I will do my best to make it a smooth year, and I appreciate the votes and the vote of confidence. Thank you. I would like to open up the floor for nominations for the office of Vice President. Do we have any nominations? Mr. Lardo? Mr. Prato, nomination for Mr. Prato. Do we have any other nominations? Move to close nominations.
Cast one vote.
Cast one vote, please. Mr. Bilson, cast the one vote.
And we'll call the roll
Nominations are
call.
closed. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr.
Okay.
Corretto, would you attend the podium, please? Raise your right hand. I, Anthony Corretto,
I, Anthony Pareto,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of Vice President
of Vice President
of the Board of Education
of the Board of Education
of the City School District of the City of Niagara Falls,
of the City School District of the City of Niagara Falls,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Here it is. Right there, Anthony.
You got it.
I think now we can proceed with the agenda of the day, Mr. President.
Sounds
and
like a
Mr.
plan.
Superintendent.
Thank you, and congratulations to all. Mr. Petrosi, Mr. Pareto, congratulations, board members.
Thank you,
The-
colleagues.
The next appointments, designations, and authorizations and policy that Mr. Petrosi will lead you through feature no changes from the current year. I know we briefly went through this, but there is not a change in any of the positions, appointments, designations, or authorizations. So just for the record. If you were satisfied, and I certainly am satisfied recommending these to you, there were no changes. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Mark. For the two gentlemen that are virtual with us this evening, if you have a no vote or an abstention, please make sure I hear it. Otherwise, because of the delay, I'm going to assume it's a yay vote. And if you should leave for whatever reason, please let me know that you were not voting so I could show you absent. Okay, saying that, I'm going to start with number 4. We're going to go through 4.01 and 4.12 together, and these appointments are for the district clerk, internal claims auditor, unemployment insurance consultant, employees having access to handicapped children records, public records access officer, records management officer, district treasurer, tax collector, Medicaid compliance officer, director of school health, data privacy information officer, and chief emergency officer. Motion, please. Moved by Mr. Consemi, second by Mr. Pareto. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi?
Yes.
Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
9 yeas, no nays. Thank you. Moving on to 5.01 to 5.07. These designees are for official bank depositories, transfer agent for debt services, municipal bond consultant, bonding attorneys, the official newspaper, regular monthly meetings, and board representative for selection of impartial hearing officers. Motion by Mr. Consemi. Mr. Pareto. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi?
Yes.
Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Paul, you there? He's there, must not be able to hear.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Paul, do we get a vote on you?
Ollie?
You might not be able to get
Maybe
through.
he lost his.
Should we show that as a yay and then come back, or? Okay. Show as a no vote, unless
No
it gets
vote?
corrected, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to number 6, purchasing agent is 601 and 602 is certification of payrolls. Motion, please. Mr. Consemi, Mr. Pareto, questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson?
Yes.
Mr. Consemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes, and yes on the item before as well. Sorry about that.
That's okay, thanks, Paul.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Okay, 9 yea, no nay, and to show the other one before it as all 9 yea. Thank you very much. 7 is just 7.01 purchasing procedures policy. Thank you, Mr. Pareto. Mr. Bilson on the second. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson?
Yes.
Mr. Consemi?
Yes.
Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
And 9 yeas, no nays. Thank you very much. Could we have a motion for adjournment for this meeting, please? Mr. Consemi, Mr. Bilson, all in favor? Aye. Any yea, nays?
Aye.
Okay, no nays, 9 yeas, no nays, meeting adjourned. Now, moving into the 7-7 regular board meeting, agenda, we will call this meeting to order. Would you please call the roll, Wendy, or you want to just keep the same roll?
Mr. Bass?
Present.
Mr. Bilson? Here. Mr. Consemi? Here. Mr. Capizzi? Here. Mrs. Dunn? Here. Mr. Cadella?
Here.
Mr. Pareto?
Here.
Mr. Velardo?
Here.
And Mr. Petrosi?
Here. Okay, we will move into oral communications. Would anybody like to address the board? I have one person that's signed up. Is this an agenda item, Gloria, or a non-agenda item? None. Okay, so we will take that at the end of the meeting. Okay. Recommended actions from superintendent. Is there any written communications, Wendy? My apologies. None. Okay.
Pardon? No, no written communications.
Okay, recommended actions for the superintendent of schools. We're taking 4.01 and 4.02. They are approval of the minutes of the June meeting and approval of budget transfer. Moved by Mr. Pareto, second by Mr. Consemi. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson?
Yes.
Mr. Consemi?
Yes.
Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
And Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays. 4.03, these are a handful of bids: electrical supplies, plumbing supplies, and athletic apparel. Do we have a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. Pareto. Mr. Consemi, any questions?
Just so we're all clear, it's Wesco on the electrical supplies, Herb on the plumbing supplies, and AdPro on the athletic apparel in-game. They came to us in between our meetings. I've tried to keep you apprised of that. Becky and Earl, Julie, and Ann have looked those over, and they're in line.
Mark, where are they located at Pro?
Wesco, Earl, or Becky?
No, the athletics, and the athletic supplies. At Pro?
Hang on. It's in Buffalo.
All right.
Question for Mr.
I'll look
Corretto.
it up,
Oh, that's
Mr.
right,
Velardo.
but it's basically a local.
It's Buffalo. I don't know have the exact address.
All right.
Yeah, there, question.
You okay? You done, Nick? No, sorry. Tony?
A question, this is for Earl. The electrical and the plumbing, are we okay with them kind of locking it in for a period of time, or are we getting 12 months out of this, or probably not?
Probably not going to get 12 months out of fixed pricing right now. I was able to pin them down about, in the plumbing side, Mr. Pareto, I also included bottle fillers.
Gotcha.
So that we can get that get a good price on that, and so we're set to go with that. But they're probably going to hold their prices for about 6 months. We may for the first time in many years be bringing you a second bid approval. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that was the question. It was, oh boy, if you can get 6 months, we've done well. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi?
Yes.
Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays. Thank you very much.
AdPro is at 55 Amherst Villa Road in Buffalo, New York, 14225.
Thank you, Mark. 4.04 Treasurer's Report, along with the 4.05, the Budget Status Report, received and filed. Moving on to Personnel Report, certificated, 4.06. Motion? Jimmy? Mr. Consemi? Second, Mr. Pareto. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays.
Mr. Petrosi, may I make a comment?
Of course you may.
Thank you. I just wanted to give you an update. When we last were together, through the efforts of Ms. Massaro, we were at 96% staff ready for the new year. As of 3 o'clock today, I would say she's at 99.5. We are still seeking 1 science teacher and 2 school psychologists. They're not all reflected on this report, but through the next month or so, she will work to get them on your August 25th board report. But I think the good news is she and the principals today had choices, were able to fill all but 2 school psychologists and 1 science position. If we were to open school on Monday, everything would be filled except those 2, and we now have 2 months to work on that. Now, that doesn't take into account maternity leaves and unfortunate accidents or somebody else that happens to retire or move between now and then. But on July 7th, and it was remarked by a principal yesterday, that they don't recall having their staff this complete for their planning this early in the year. So she, being Maria, is at 99.2. Would you agree? Yes. Those are the 3 open positions. And today, she had some choices with principals that will be reflected on your next personnel report. So I think that's a really good position to be in. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that report, Mark. And good, nice job, Maria. Nice job. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any more questions? We did vote on that, right?
We did, yep.
I appreciate that. Personnel report classified, 4.07. Motion, please. Jimmy? Second, Mr. Velardo? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you over there. I'll catch you next one. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays. Thank you very much.
And to comment, if I may, on that side,
Yes, you may, sir.
we are a little behind, not behind, but we have work to do there. And I would believe, Ms. Massaro, it's mainly in the associates. So we do have some associate positions to fill. If we were to start school Monday, we do have 2 months to do that. And Ms. Massaro is planning a job fair on August 9th. There will be a job fair mainly around positions of the associate level. But I know she'll get that, and we'll be taking out some advertising, and we will be taking out, she'll be working pretty earnestly in the next month to get that shored up. Correct, Maria? So that's where we're at, but I think it's a good place to be July 7th.
Thank you again for that report.
You're welcome.
Nice work. Yes, you may ask anything. Who is that? Oh, I didn't know there was an addendum. It's not on my script. Is that for certificated?
No, it is just an addendum. It is for the reappointment of our safety and security director. And it wasn't included in your packets, it just made it not make that script.
Okay, so it's not, it didn't make it to my script, so let's vote to bring that addendum in, and then we will vote on the addendum. Okay, so can I have a motion to bring that addendum in for, it is for? Safety and Security Director. I got a motion by Mrs. Dunn, second by Mr. Pareto. Any questions?
Just a comment, we are lucky to retain the same gentleman who did a fantastic job. There is a slight increase in his salary, but he has worked tirelessly in his 6 months that he's been here.
Yeah, no question about that. He's done a great job. Okay, so we're voting on the addendum to bring it in. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi?
Good catch.
Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. Okay, now the addendum is in. Let's vote on the addendum as written. Moved by Mr. Consemi, second by Mr. Velardo. Got you, Mr. Velardo. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. Okay, 9 yeas, no nays, and we're all set, Maria? We're good at it. No, thank you.
Good catch, Maria.
All right, moving on to 408 and 409 are the Committee on Special Ed and the Committee on Preschool Special Ed. Motion, please. Mr. Consemi on the motion. Second by Mr. Pareto. Questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays. Thank you very much. We will take short-term contracts, and there are a handful of them. It looks like 5. We're going to take number 1, Eric Mitchell for Literacy Summer Camp, Lomax Barnes for Youth Motivation, Rich Moranto, Moranto Media, National Federation for Just Communities, and see-through math professional development, new employees.
I got a question on
A
this.
question, well, we need a motion in a second
Okay.
first. Motion by Mr. Velardo, we have a second? Sure. Second by Mr. Pareto. Okay, your question, please, Mr.
What's this
Velardo.
National Foundation for Just Communities?
They are helping with new employee orientation on any diversity training that we have to do. They have been in the district before. I think you may have sat in on
I
one
don't
of them.
think so.
You didn't go to the high school that time?
Oh, yeah, I did.
That's the,
Yeah. Is that the
that's
same outfit?
Same outfit, same training, but we're doing it because August 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th is new staff orientation.
All right.
And we want to expose that new staff to the same training. And that's what this contract is for.
Okay.
Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi? Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes, 9 yeas, no nays. Thank you very much. 4.11, early Head Start and the Head Start reports. Thank you, Mr. Velardo. Mr. Consemi on the second. Questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays. Now, 6.01 to 6.09, I am going to eliminate, I'm going to hold back 6.07. So we are not going to be voting on 6.7 in this batch. We're going to take 601 to 609, eliminating 607. And I'll explain for that in a minute. So I need a motion on 01 through 09, eliminating 07. Mr. Pareto? Mr. Velardo on the second. Questions? I'll give you the reason it's not in there yet. We'll bring it up now. I'll explain it to you.
Just a comment, if I may. We're still looking for 2 audit committee members, 1 community, 1 board. We approved the school lunch budget even though we're still a community eligibility district. The calendar of events takes into account a very good schedule for the budget coming up next March and April. And the fee schedule for use of facilities has been updated. And I want the board members to be aware there has been some increases in the fee schedule for community usage because salaries and other things have increased. So there are some nominal increases in the fee schedule. Thank you, Mr. Petrosi.
Of course. Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays. All right, 6.07 is the approval of the resolution to confirm the tax rolls and authorize the tax levy and the issuance of a tax warrant. Need a motion and a second. I'll explain what we're doing here. Thank you, Mr. Velardo. I need a thank you, Mrs. Dunn. I'm sorry to miss you last time. Okay, this is a tax. This is a tax warrant, a tax levy that each individual board member must sign before they leave today. So the 2 virtual people that are on the internet must either come down here tonight and sign this, or abstain, or vote no, because it must be signed tonight. Okay, so we have a motion and a second saying that everyone that votes on this must sign it today, and there's no wiggle room in that. Okay, so that was the reason for voting on this separately. Saying that, any other questions? Call a roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Okay, that means you got to come down and sign it tonight, Earl. Or abstain, or vote no. Or come down and sign it, your choice.
I'll abstain.
Was that an abstention, Earl?
Yes, that was an abstention.
I didn't hear you. Thank you. Okay. Show one abstention. Move on. Thank you.
Mr. Bilson?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsemi?
Yes.
Mr. Capizzi?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn? Mr. Cadella?
Abstain.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 7 yeas, no nays, 2 abstentions. Thank you very much. Moving on to some contracts, 6.10 to 6.16. This is for student and employee services. We start with Niagara Falls Memorial Medical Center and our athletic programs, Western New York Occupational Health, Probe Services, Buffalo Special Investigators, Grant Preparation, Battaglia and Associates, LaSalle Early Childhood Center, and Integration of Technology as TEMP. Motion. I have a motion by Mr. Pareto. I didn't hear the second. Mr. Bilson on the second. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsemi?
Yes.
Mr. Capizzi?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn? Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. And that's 9 yeas, no nays. Now, we have a bunch on this one. 6.17 to 6.44. There are several. I'll go through them quickly.
Did we miss one? Did we miss 610 to 6?
Did I miss something?
610 to 616.
We just voted. We just voted on those.
Yeah,
Mark.
we're on 617.
I just voted on those.
I'm so sorry.
Trying to
I made a
confuse me. You're
mistake.
testing me.
I'm sorry.
testing
Earl Smeal, I'm sorry. I made my first mistake of the afternoon.
Okay, we're going to take 617 to 6.44, and as we go through these, if anyone wants to vote no on one item, just let me know. Okay, because there's several of them here. Okay, saying that, first one is appointment of Medicaid compliance officer. Next, impartial hearing officers, surrogate parents, appointments to the committee on preschool special ed and regular special ed, maximum staffing solutions, supplemental health care, Aries Transportation, Aspire of Western New York, Autism Services, Baker Victory Services, Buffalo School District, School 84, BHSC Support Services, Buffalo Hearing and Speech, Catalysian Center, Center for the Handicapped Children, Community-Based Therapies, Gateway Longview, the Arc of Erie County, Randolph Academy, New Directions in Family Youth Services, Memorial Medical Center for Occupational Health, Memorial Medical Center for Physical Therapy, Stanley G. Falk School, Summit Center, Physical and Occupational Services, and Deaf Service Bridges, and Learn Well. Motion, please. Moved by Mr. Kinsemi. Mr. Velardo on a second. Any questions?
Just a comment, if I may. 617, we finally hit $1 million in Medicaid claims, which is a tribute to Ms. Massaro, Ms. Holliday, and Ms. Liz Carroll. So I just wanted to make that note. We claim Medicaid on a lot of programs, and we just claimed without any audits $1 million through that. That's a big feat. The rest of the resolutions, for those that may be listening, are to service appropriately based on the IEP needs of our special needs children who we don't service in district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsemi?
Yes.
Mr. Capizzi? Mrs. Dunn? Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Mr. Petrosi, show yes for all except for 6.31 Catalysian Center, show me a no. Okay, so we have 9 yeas, no nays,
No.
except for one.
8-1, right?
No, I voted no.
Oh, only on the
I
one?
was clarifying.
All right. I'm trying
I
to catch
voted-
you, Russ.
I voted yea on everything except the one nay on 6.31.
Russ, I'm trying to catch you with something wrong. I can't do it.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, we're almost done, we got a few more here. 6.45 to 6.48, these are our appointments. Our first one is for our clerk, Ms. Glasser, and our attorney, Mr. Massaro, along with our second attorney, Mr. Rossetti, and our independent claims auditor, Denise Cobbler. Mr. Velardo, second, Mr. Consemi. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Consemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes, thank you. That's 9 yeas, no nays. Appreciate that. 649 to 650 is agreement with the City of Niagara Falls for Officer of the Day. And on the second, 6.50 is police officers that serve for resource officers. Motion and a second, please. Mr. Pareto on the motion. Second. Second by Mr. Consemi. Any questions? One question from myself. How much do we pay for the resource officer?
I believe collectively, I'm going to say $460,000, Becky,
For,
4 resource officers.
Correct, and that includes their benefits.
It includes their benefits, their FICA, their everything.
Yep, their salary and benefits.
460 for 4. So
Are we
Appreciate it.
charged at all, Mr. Laurie, for the cars when they're on the premises?
we don't pay anything for the cars.
thank you for that, sir. We have a motion and a second. Can we call the roll, please?
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Mr. Consemi? Mr. Capizzi? Mrs. Dunn? Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays. Thank you very much. 6.51 to 6.54, there's a renting of some spaces to the police athletically, the teachers for the credit, the Niagara Falls teachers for the credit union, copy space for BOCES, classroom facilities were also for BOCES. Motion, please. Mr. Consemi on the motion. Mrs. Dunn on the second. Sounds good to me. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Mr. Consemi? Mr. Capizzi? Mrs. Dunn? Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Mr. Petrosi?
Yes, thank you very much. Seeing that's 9 yeas, no nays. 6.55 to 59 are purchasing and financial and acceptance of funds. And 5.5 is purchasing through Niagara Orleans BOCES. 6.56 is contract with Omni Financial Group. And 6.57, capital markets advisors. And 6.58, Ruffalo reimbursements. And 6.59, acceptance of funds for ARP homeless children. 6.60, payments to the New York State Small City School Districts for ongoing legal fees. No, I'm sorry, leave that 6.6 off. That's going to be a separate vote. Okay, from 5.5 to 5.9, motion please. Mr. Consemi? Second by Mr. Pareto. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Kinsemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no yeas, no nays. Thank you very much. 6.60 is the approval of payments to the New York State Association of Small City Schools for ongoing legal fees. Mr. Velardo. Mr. Consemi, questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Oh, wait, sorry.
Yes.
I have a question by Mr. Consemi, please.
Do we have to rescind the fact, Mr. Laurie, that we voted no to do that before? Do we have to rescind, the fact that we voted not to do this before?
My recollection is we never voted not to do this. We heard that there wouldn't be any additional legal fees. So this is a new allocation of $17,000. I was on a call with the team today, and they were talking about future legal fees, and I said I can't commit to that. And I suggested that they come and present to the board as to what those legal fees would be. But this is for $17,000 in terms of the case previously, and we never voted no to not do it. We did hear there wouldn't be additional ones, though.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsemi?
Yes.
Mr. Capizzi?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays. Thank you very much. 6.61 and 6.65 are due to our items for our capital projects. 6.61 is for CPL, the service project architect for our construction of our doors at the CEC Center. And 6.62 is CPL to be project architect for the reconstruction of the roof at CEC. 6.63, CPL to service project architect for the construction of a playground. And 6.64 is PIP rubber and installation services. And 6.65 is a payment number 6 to U.S. Services for security camera work. Motion, please. Mr. Bilson. Mr. Pareto, any questions?
Yes.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to direct this one towards Earl. UNS.
Sorry, Mr. Pareto, UNS.
Okay, now this is for the security camera work. Now, as we go forward, we're possibly looking at some doors, correct? To blend
Yes.
in with the cameras?
Yes.
Okay. We'd had, at one of our buildings, we had some difficulty. Now, they were great. They came right out within 20 minutes, and they were there. But my concern is to make sure that this thing gets engineered correctly, that we don't have what happened to one of our buildings where we had a lockout. It read the CPU died, and it read a lockout, and it actually locked out all the doors.
Talking to the mic if you may.
Okay, it actually locked out all the doors. We had to actually kill the power to the devices to get the magnets to demagnetize to open the doors. That's the only thing. I'm not blaming UNS, but we had to go through a whole bunch of reprogramming, and it was only it's only a 4-year-old building. So the only concern I have is that we still have an ability to, if there is a difficulty, a power failure or something, that we can still conduct our business in safety correctly. So that's my concern. It's more a comment concern than it is a question.
Okay, so, and I may defer to Ray, because this is really Ray's end of the horse, you might say. But this is for a payment for the phase 2 of the Smart Schools Bond Act, and we haven't gotten to the point yet where we're using phase 3, correct me if I'm wrong, Ray, for the security expert solution that we're looking towards right now. So Ray, that's where I'd leave it for you.
Yeah, sure. I think the next step for us is an alarm system, which is going to be the intermediate phase until we can get into the marriage of the systems, the security cameras married to the access control systems. That's going to be kind of step 3 or phase 3, as Earl was talking about. Once we get to that phase, one advantage that we do have, which was not completely self-healing, but what will help us is that in each building we have hardwired controllers, so that if we have a CPU error, the communication from the CPU, the main computer, the Niagara Falls High School server room, that could be severed. But in each building, there is a controller that carries all the instructions of doors and how they can be entered. So that isn't a complete solution, but it is a big advantage because it eliminates a lot of variables. The one variable it doesn't eliminate is the variable of the power goes down at that particular building. And then we're kind of stuck a bit where we'd have to look to kind of a manual solution similar to what you went through. But I'm hoping once we get into this project with UNS, would be this year, we'll address some better strategies to handle that.
So if I may, and Earl's right, what you're being asked to support this evening, right, is $9,312.18 to pay for the installation of the 130 cameras. That's all done. The only other resolution you'll see for UNS is some retainage we hold. And once Ray and Earl and BCC are ready to sign off, we'll release the retainage. To your question, Mr. Preto, which is a good one, when we start those discussions in earnest about that system, we're going to ask, remembering what you said, and I don't want to reference necessarily the train station, but how do we protect against that happening? Because we have a few more people coming through our doors than the train station does.
They have 35, that's big.
Yeah, and I want to make sure at the time I have a strong answer for you and the board and the district. It's my understanding that one of the tasks that CPL is leading is to work with those vendors like UNS and others to design the system. And my expectation is that on the 15th of July, I'd get an initial report on where we are. Before we move forward with any of that, we'll come back to you with a capital, we'll call it under the capital projects report, and you can ask that question. I know you understand tonight's is just for a payment. And unless there's other questions, then I want to make 2 other comments on these resolutions. I just want you to notice 663 is to pay CPL. They engineered the playground for Bleneva Bond School. And Earl, I believe July 12th, which is next Tuesday, the first shovel goes in the ground for the Bond playground.
That is our hopes. It's all pointing in that direction. We have a kickoff meeting this Friday at 10 a.m., July 8th, tomorrow morning. And then it could start, actually, I'm hearing, as early as Monday.
Okay. And finally, if you remember the budget, and I know you did because you sat through those meetings, we put money aside to start doing some capital repairs that didn't qualify for our capital project. And we are moving very fast, as indicated in 6.64 and 6.62, to get the roof started at the CEC. So I want to just keep drawing the tie-in to the budget, to the resolution, to the timeliness of what we're doing here. So if you approve 662 and 664, that will be a chance to get bid documents out in October, when we think is the best bidding season for a roof to be installed during this budget season. So it's a lot more than you asked, but you opened the door and I thought I'd share some more information.
I just think the easiest way to solve your problem, Tony, is we're going to put your cell phone number on the doors. If they don't open, they're going to.
Well, that was part of the resolution.
That was part of the deal.
Yeah.
You already have it, trust me.
Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass? Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Kinsemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays. 6.66, the authority to make budget transfers and amendments as needed to expedite the year-end closeout. Motion, please. Mr. Kinsemi? Mr. Pareto, any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Kinsemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. 9 yeas, no nays. I am going to take 7.01 and 7.02 together. 01 is the approval of the concussion policy as amended, and .02 is the approval of the wellness policy as amended.
Mr. Petrosi, may I ask for your consideration on waiving the 30-day tabling of these two policies? And the reason I would ask that is twofold. One, there aren't structural or major changes to our concussion policy or wellness policy. They are highlighted in your resolutions in yellow and red respectively. And the second reason is next week we start summer camps, activities, sports, etc. And I want to use the most up-to-date concussion policy. God forbid a child has a concussion during that time. So I'd kindly ask for your consideration to waive the tabling on those two policies.
Okay, I don't have a motion in a second, so therefore I will ask for a motion to waive the tabling period. And that motion was made by Mr. Bilson, second by Mr. Velardo. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Kinsemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays. Now we will take the policies themselves. That's the concussion policy and the wellness policies as amended. Need a motion in a second, please. Moved by Mr. Pareto, second by Mr. Bilson. Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Kinsemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes. 9 yeas, no nays. Thank you very much. 7.03 and our last one, I need a motion to table the parent and family engagement policy. Moved to table by Mr. Velardo, second to table by Mr. Kinsemi. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Bilson? Yes. Mr. Kinsemi? Yes. Mr. Capizzi? Yes. Mrs. Dunn? Yes. Mr. Cadella?
Yes.
Mr. Pareto?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo? Yes. Mr. Petrosi?
Yes, thank you very much.
May I make a comment on that policy?
You sure may.
We are currently live streaming this meeting, and if you're not watching it this evening, you certainly can, it will be placed on our website. With respect to proposed policy 703, parent and family engagement policy for review, I'm glad that you tabled it. We need to keep it on the table until at least your August 25th meeting. This was an audit finding from our Title I review, and I want to let the viewing public know that if you wish to read this policy and comment on it, you can contact either Ms. Glasser or who will get Mr. Corella to give you the policy and explain any questions. It's Mr. Corella's responsibility during the tabling to answer and include any updates or comments that are relevant to the policy to satisfy Title I. And we did have a Title I audit, as I've shared with you. It's not complete. The updating of this policy was one of the findings in the audit that I want to stress that to the viewing public and to anyone that watches this post haste, you have that opportunity, and I would defer you to Mr. Corella. Rick, did you want to add anything that you need to satisfy that audit?
Yes, Mr. Laurie. It is not substantially different from our former policy, but it has been updated to reflect language that is new under ESSA. The old policy was written under No Child Left Behind, and you're all familiar with that federal legislation. So now the Every Student Succeed Act has changed some of the language that's required in parent engagement policies. So our policy now is updated to reflect that. And it also reflects more of what we're doing in 2022 as opposed to 2012 when the old policy was enacted. It will be posted on our district website, and there is a comment form for anyone who wishes to share comments on the content of that policy. They can type it directly into they can open up the link and type it directly into the form. So if anyone has any questions, they can certainly call me, but it's not necessary. You can actually have full access to the policy and a comment form to send your comments in.
Thanks, Rick. It's important. We want to close any open items on that audit, and your explanation was better than mine, and thank you for taking charge of that audit. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Moving on to oral communications, the public comment period, not agenda items. I have one speaker, Gloria Dolson. Please state your name and your address, Gloria. And you have 3 minutes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How is everyone? And I just want to thank everyone for being able to speak this evening. I didn't know that we were having a board meeting. First of all, I'd just like to also thank all your board members that attended the LaSalle Educational Club Scholarship and Award Dinner on June the 10th, and also Mr. Laurie for hosting and mentioning that it should be held at Niagara Falls High School. It was a great event, and for those of us who are not board members, hopefully you'll put it on your calendar next year. It is June the 9th, and we just hope to see you there. Also, just want to congratulate the new board members. Hopefully, we'll be seeing more of you. We really do appreciate Men Standing Strong Together, working with you board members and members of the Niagara Falls Board of Education. Indeed, it was a pleasure, and I am very thankful for having an opportunity, Men Standing Strong Together, to work in the schools, Niagara Falls High School and Gaskill. I think that we were a blessing. I commend those men and women because they've taken time out of their day. Most of us are retired, so we did it because we cared. We wanted to see our kids being safe, and staff members as well. And I think that the staff understood that we were there to help. And the students understood after a while that we were there to help. And we got a chance to break bread, as you want to say, with a lot of the students that were not used to a sort of discipline. And I think that many of them, dress code got a lot better, but I know the mouth did, the language did. So again, we hope that we will continue to work together closely. And I just want to also address the fact that being in the community is very, 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 very important. Because a lot of things that we have learned over the years is something that we should have been probably knowing all along. I have been a product of Lexi Sanders and Caleb Sanders, and as a child, I have always been involved in my community. So, you know, people reach out to you because if they know you, they'll call you and share things with you. I do see, and we see a need to be more involved in the elementary school, even in nursery. When you know the families, and almost every day I'm called and given some good information or new information about families. My little grandchild, who's 3 years old, she was talking to a 9-year-old, a little neighbor of hers, and so she was reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and she was singing, Jesus Love Me. My son called me and said, you know, Mommy, the little girl was overwhelmed by Alexiana knowing that. And he said, she's go through a lot, a little child. And I said, well, what school did she go to? He said, well, not very often did she attend school. So we need to come up with something working closer together. And we're not saying we need to be blaming each other or pointing fingers, but we need to come together and come up with a way that we can let students know school is so important and that they have maybe the fact that they might not see that it, in the long run, what it's going to offer them or what they're going to gain from education. And that's one reason why I've always said that the walls need to talk, and that in every school building, nursery as well, that when you see the walls of any school, it represents not only the children, the students, their homes, and then it'll tell them, okay, if y'all see a doctor or a lawyer or astronaut or whoever, that seed is planted.
Okay, Gloria, that's
So-
5 minutes. I'm going to ask you to sum up.
So again, Mr. Petrosi, can we get together during the summer and talk about these very issues that Ms. Dolson is trying to come before this board? And I never can talk fast enough and long enough about something that I am very compassionate about in our community.
More than welcome to.
One more thing, I'd like to invite you all to the Men Standing Strong Community Youth Day, Fun Day, Saturday. I'm passing right down this way. And hopefully you are members. Take time out of your day. We did send out letters for support, donations, and you can see there Mrs. Dolson's name. You all have a blessed summer, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you, Mr. Petrosi.
You're more than welcome. And thank you. Okay. That was our only speaker this evening. And I'm going to move on and we'll get information reports. We're going to start with Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Laurie.
Thank you. Is that the world-class radio reporter, Mike Desmond? Welcome, Mike. Nice to see you. Just a few updates. Mr. Petrosi referenced it. August 11th is the retreat. Judy is collecting topics. I do have 2 or 3 from Judy already. I want to say to Ms. Dolson and the team, the Men Standing Strong were a blessing. As I've said kind of my catchphrase, the village did come to the community during the time when we needed, and that she touched on a topic where I think we can use the most help, and that's student attendance. And we'll talk more about that. But I thank them publicly, on the record, for their work. It certainly made things a heck of a lot better. And by the end, we were a team of one moving in the right direction. So thank you very much. Also remind everybody, and you will see reminders frequently, August 30th, 4 o'clock, that is the official Bleneva Bond School Renaming Day, but we'll flood the area with reminders. It should be a great, great celebration. We did post the flyer on our websites, and we will use it on our infrequent auto dialer calls. Summer is on, but on Monday, this coming Monday, July 11th, 2,350 students return to summer school, programming, recreation, or some STEM, P-Tech camp. So that's 2,350 of the 7,000 that we have registered. It's up a little bit. Now, the trick is getting them there, and busing. Those are the two tricks: attendance and busing. But we do have 2,350 registered. I can go through them by number: 700 elementary, 348 in prep, 864 in Niagara Falls High School, sports and recreation, 300 P-Tech 48, esports, STEM 2030, Camp Wolverine 40. So the trick is getting there. A couple of initiatives that we are working on. We are still working on our alternative program within the high school, our 7th grade super accelerated, and the PS2 high school coordinators are working. I mentioned earlier about security. I say to the listening public, the schools are open 5 days a week. Central office is open 5 days a week. Between 8 and 3:30 are the best times to contact us. We don't take a break. We don't take off. If there's a need, earlier in the summer is better. I just wanted to recognize our departments a little bit here. You heard the work that Maria has done in human resources with the hiring, which is excellent. Today, we had a chance to stop at GJ Mann for a quick press conference, and the school looked ready to open, Earl. It was that clean on the second floor. They were still working on the first floor, but it's July 7th, and it probably could be ready in 2 weeks. That's how far ahead I thought that school looked. The other schools will get there as well, but that really, even the grounds look, ship-shape. So we're in a good place there. Rick is in busy season because of all of the curriculum work and tasks that he has to do. And just the finance office, we just got another report from our internal claims auditor, the month of May. She reviewed $8.5 million worth of claims, not one finding, not one confirmatory. So that's good on the finance side. Board members, thank you so much for your passage of those resolutions and questions. Congratulations again to our two re-elected board members and to our great leadership. I say thank you very, very much for being part of what we know is a terrific Board of Education. Thank you.
I appreciate those kind words, Mr. Laurie. Thank you.
You deserve it.
I'm going to start with Mr. Villardo this evening. Anything, sir? Thank you, sir. Mr. Bilson.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Mr. Katsemi.
Thank you to all of you, and thank you for all the effort that you're putting into our district. Mark, I have one thing that I'm worried about a little bit. The mural that's up already at Niagara Street School. Do you think we should protect it a little bit? The kids were throwing some stones at it the other day.
Sure.
I'm just afraid they're going to chip it or something.
Sure, I haven't been there to look at it recently, But when we go next week for the playground, you know, the walkthrough, we'll take a look at that and see if there's something we could cover it with. Okay, no, I haven't looked at it recently, but I will. Earl, will we take a look at that? All right, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, there's no name on it yet or anything.
Right.
The kids are just,
Right.
and I don't want to see it damaged. It's a
Right.
beautiful mural.
Yeah.
And
If
it's
there's any nicks, we'll get Lynch and team to come and clean them up, and then there's got to be something that you could cover it with or seal it. Okay, yep, good idea.
Vinyl, something.
Yeah.
Good point.
Thank you, Earl.
I'd like to congratulate Mr. Petrosi and Tony again. God bless you guys. Keep leading us forward.
Thank you, sir.
Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Consemi. Thanks for those kind words. Ms. Clara?
I have nothing.
Mr. VP, you're up.
Okay. Again, I'd like to thank our colleagues for vote of confidence for myself and Mr. Petrosi. Again, our staff doing another fantastic job putting together this, you know, very large personnel reports, and of course our finances are in great condition. And then our, you know, all we have to do now is just ready for school to start. So, but again, it's a pleasure to serve you folks and serve the community. Thank you.
Going around the horn, anybody else? Wendy, anything?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Rick, Earl, Julie? Nothing, Becky?
No.
Maria?
Nothing.
Oh, I'm getting off easy tonight. Our lawyers? What, Angelo, anything? That's a surprise. No problem, get right around to you. And how about over here? Behind me? No, you're up, Mark. Something else?
No, we're good. I'm sorry?
No, you had something else?
The remote people? Are they still-
Oh, thank you. I forgot about them. I forgot about you two remote. Let's have Mr. Cadella. Anything you'd like to add, sir?
No, I'm all set. Thanks, Russ.
Appreciate that. My apologies. And how about Mr. Earl?
No, nothing. Everyone have a
Thank you.
nice safe summer.
I apologize, gentlemen. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to be very brief. Thank you for the vote of confidence. I will do my best to keep you all informed and exercise my duties as best as I can. And that's a sincere thank you. I'd also like to thank Wendy. Nice job tonight, Wendy.
Excellent.
Excellent job.
Excellent.
And I want to thank Judy for preparing everything. I was all set to go. Gloria, thank you for you and your staff for all you've done. You want to meet over the summer, I'd be more than happy to. If you want to meet with some of us, me, a couple of, we'll set something up. I'll give you some dates. Staff along the wall, thank you for all that you have done. I know I know I made it look easy, but it wasn't easy. We have hours and hours. Thank you to everyone. I wish you all a great summer. Enjoy it. It's going to be, it's going to seem short, and you've got a lot of work to do next year. We are going to adjourn this evening in the memory of just only two people, Salvatore Bruno, retired employee, and Erica Heim, sister-in-law of Judy Glasser. Saying that, but I have a motion to adjourn, please. Thank you, Mr. Bilson. Second by Mr. Velardo. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, everybody, and good night.